everybody, it's 214 React here, and today we're looking at the Wolfman demo from NVIDIA, which was released on February 1st, 2001, and was originally released for the GeForce 4 series of graphics cards. It uses real-time volumetric fur tracing on a fully animated character model, and was the first demo to do so. So this is some really cool tech that I don't think we really saw land in games that commonly until a good few years later. Maybe some games had it, maybe on the Xbox, that sort of fur effect, but generally it took a while for it to be quite commonplace, I think. So it'll be really interesting to look into it, this early phase, all the way back in 2001. And again, it's one of those demos that looks incredible because it's putting the graphics card's full attention on just this one model. Let's take a look at the README. There's two READMEs of this one. There's the README and then there's README_werewolf. The README.txt seems to be one that's written by a developer rather than a bit more of a public-facing README. And it also says last updated 31st of January 2002. So I think they've possibly updated it since it was originally released in 2001. So of course it's got real-time volumetric fur rendering, per pixel anisotropic lighting using pixel shaders, matrix palette skinning using vertex shaders, and fully self-shadowed using shadow maps. It's got 8 blended fur layers, 61 bones, and 4 bones per vertex, and 97,000 polygons per frame. So we've got some basic controls here. The left mouse button rotates, the middle mouse button pans, the right mouse button drag up and down to zoom. Toggle wireframe with W, S toggles shaded, F toggles the fins, minus subtracts fur layers, plus adds fur layers, the square bracket increases and decreases fur depth, and there's different buttons here to do all the different animations. There's slow motion, toggle music, pause unpause, show move light mode, the standard NV demo viewer, and the Maya style viewer. So now what we have is the other README, the README_werewolf. It's a little bit more marketing sort of style, I think. So it reads, another first for NVIDIA, real-time volumetric fur rendering on a fully animated character model, but this is no cute furry dog. 61 bones, 100,000 polygons, and 8 fur layers make the NVIDIA Werewolf rendering challenge that makes other graphics cards run away screaming. While the GeForce 4's dual programmable shaders rip through the task of animating the Wolfman's skin and fur, the advanced pixel shaders of the Infinite FX2 engine are shading each individual hair strand using a self-shadowed per pixel anisotropic lighting model. And then it's got the features here, and it's interestingly rounded up the amount of polygons here from 97,000 to 100,000. So again, you kind of tell it's a bit more of that sort of marketing spiel. Other than that, it's all the kind of same thing here, the same controls. Unfortunately, a lot of these demos don't have white papers with them. They go into real technical detail, like the 3D marks that we looked at last year. But we can kind of still see from these features what they're doing, and we'll be able to see that during the demo as well. So I've got a pretty standard install here. It's kind of similar to the Chameleon one, which was released just before this for the GeForce 3. So you've got the audio here, standard WAVs. You've got the models, which is actually an NMB, which means it's the same model format as what they use in the Chameleon demo. So I may try and put that into the Chameleon demo and see if it runs it. So this seems to be using a program called furviewer.gl.exe, which must have been what they originally started on to get the fur technology working, and then they put the wolf in and animations in later. So let's have a look here. This one is another one that has all the programs in because this is DX8 and beyond. So it's programmable shaders. So you can have a look here. Program MC1 Lite. Okay, that's just literally a one-liner. So a lot of these are header files or just things with very basic variables in, and then some of the deeper ones. There we go. So you got the program MCB1D Fog 1 Light. This looks like some very old school style shader code. Looking at it deeply, it looks like this is before high level shader code. So this looks like assembly, possibly. Looks like it's defining certain variables here, pointers, maybe precision decimals or floating points. Then you've got these move commands. Don't know what they do. I'm gonna have to sit down and try and look into VXPs at some point because this is really old shader code. Some stuff commented out here. I think it's just assembling up a number of variables, assigning them to textures, and moving them into memory somewhere. Yeah, that's really interesting. That could be a whole video in itself trying to figure this out. But anyway, that's cool. And again, you can look at these files and even edit them if you knew what you were doing to change how the application looked. And then you've got the textures here, which is the same sort of DDSs we've seen before, normal maps for all the different parts of the wolf, as well as an IFL file, which takes into account all of the cube map stuff. Yeah, you've got the cube maps here, and there you go. It's one element of the cube map. So it's kind of the same structure as the Chameleon one. So we can probably look through a bit of that later, and then there's just a few DDS files for the user interface. So let's have a look at the runme.bat. Basically exactly the same as the Chameleon demo. Calls the FurViewer GL, puts in the model as a parameter. True probably references VSync, 1024 by 768, 32-bit rendering, 16-bit Z buffer. What I'm going to do is duplicate this batch file and make it run in 1080. So there we are. We have the runme 1080.bat, which is ready to go. Interestingly, a lot of these demos run in different ways. So some of them, the one we saw last week, the grass one, actually allowed you to set the refresh rate, but this one doesn't. The Chameleon one allowed you to set all sorts of other strange things that I'm not even sure what they were setting, possibly like Z buffer formats and stuff like that. This one doesn't allow that. So let's run this and see how it goes in 1080. Alrighty, so it's got some almost hot pants on there, which is quite funny. So got a bump mapped floor here, and the animation begins. Got a really simple background. It's going to be a looping floor path, just like the Chameleon, where he just walks forever on a path that just keeps going and going. He really is wearing hot pants. That's hilarious. Kind of has a 3D Mark 2000 feel to it. We've got the controls here. You've got navigation. You can set the camera to walk spherical, or you can switch the light on fully. You can left mouse button to move the light around. Adjust the camera, spherical. There you go. So you can adjust the character in a spherical way, or move it around like this, or move the light around, which is where you can see all the really cool self-shadowing. So if we can pause it. Look at that fur detail. That looks incredible. There we go. Now we can get a good look at that fur. Look at that. That looks really cool. Kind of see it's a low resolution shadow map, but it's filtered in a really nice way, or it's just the way it's landing over the fur. But for the time, that's pretty good. You can see some vertex shading there. Bump maps there. So you can move the light and it'll be static, but you can also kind of swing the light around if you just move the mouse and let go while it's moving. You can kind of put the light in an automatic sort of rotation. That's really interesting. Turn the music off, you can pause, you can put it in slow-mo. Look at that. Look at that. Some really nice shadow mapping. Let's keep that light still. Let's have a look at what modes we've got. So you can toggle the wireframe. It's quite a lot of polys. Yep, 97,000 polys. Toggle the shading. There's your normals. That's all grey for some reason. So it looks like the standard texture areas have all got normals. The rest is all just looks like grayscale up and down, like bumped. And that's what's on the fur bits. You have points here as well. There's quite a lot of detail on there. You go back to your standard view. You can subtract fins with F. Okay, that kind of gives them a bit of a shave. So the fins is the technical term for these little hairs, which is where the little voxel blocks come up. And they're all affected by the light as well. Don't think each of the fins makes a shadow though. You can subtract the fur layers. Completely wax the werewolf. Let's see if we can go to the shader view. So you can kind of see there that grayscale, whatever that shading is, expands as you add more fur and then contracts as you take the fur away, and then goes back down to the base texture where you see the normal. You've still got this kind of grey voxely sort of stuff around here. Some sort of bounding area around the polys. That's so interesting. We go back to the standard view. You just add a little bit of fur or a lot of fur. See if we can zoom right in on some fur. Get the light moved around. It's kind of clunky, this UI, but you can take away the fur. There's some sort of function that renders fur at different lengths as you crank that up. Kind of wish there was more detail on how this fur works on a low level. Okay, with the sphere, you can kind of freeze the spherical movement and zoom in. That's good. There we go. Let's go right in. Freeze that. Get the light round. It's really hard to get too zoomed in because it starts clipping on the frustrum. Look at the detail on that fur. It's like multiple layers, isn't it? It almost looks like a noise texture at that point. And then another layer, then another layer, then another layer. And then those layers combine. Yeah, you can see that. It's a flat layer, another layer on top, and it gives the illusion of hair going upwards. So that's how it works. I think that's very similar to the tech they used in the 2017 Crash Bandicoot remasters. That's very cool. That's so effective. You only notice when you go really up close how that's actually working. So it must just be like a Vertex shader assigning this sort of layer over the top, and then a pixel shader going over it to add the details on there. Some sort of pattern, noise pattern, and then the layer up, layer up, layer up, layer up. That is such a great illusion. It really looks like there's like lengthy hairs. And I'm guessing because it's done in the pixel shader, you can in real time adjust those layers and where the detail is on each layer to make it look like you're moving around the hair. Yeah, look at that. So it looks like the hair is three-dimensional, and you're able to look through the different fur layers and move around the individual hairs. Because yeah, even if you remove the fins and look around, it still looks like you're able to look through the hair like it's three-dimensional. Look at that. It's like you can look around the hair layers. You can see that side of this hair, and then go to the other side and see the other side of the hair. But the reality is, it's just these layers. And as you move, the pixel shader is rendering those layers in a different way against the lighting angle and the angle of the camera to create a different pattern on each layer, and that different pattern on each layer is adding to that illusion of 3D hair. That is amazing. That is unbelievably effective and so much more simple than I thought it was. So it's literally just layers of patterns like this. First layer, second layer, third layer, fourth layer, fifth layer, sixth layer, seventh layer, eighth layer. And yeah, that's the 8 layers of fur. It also explains why it has that weird sort of effect when you look close, and these sort of sharp angle effects. It's kind of weird patterns that almost look like water ripples. So that's why I love demos like this, because you can really dive into how this stuff works, even without necessarily having a white paper. So I think we can increase the fur depth with the square brackets. So I think what that's doing is expanding those layers out. Oh my god, how far does this setting go? So this is where you can really break the layers down, because you can just push the fur depth to a ridiculous point. So it's almost exploded the layers out there. Look at that. Look at that. You can see each individual layer of the fur. Take them all away as well. Look at that. First layer, second layer. And you know what? I think it's not even changing those patterns as you move around. It's just the patterns are layered on top of each other in a way that as each layer changes the angle to the camera, it actually looks like you're looking around the hair. That's even better. Look at that, yeah, because it's not even changing the patterns to make it look like there's different layers of hair. It's literally just the parallax effect of each layer moving as you move the camera around that gives it the illusion of depth of hair, and therefore makes it look like you're looking through layers of hair. That is insane. That is absolutely genius. It seems so much more complex than it actually is, but the actual concept is much more simple than you'd think. And being able to explode it out to this ridiculous degree really helps see that. Anyway, this poor werewolf, let's get his hair back to normal. So there we go, he's back to normal now. The other thing I really want to look at here is how that shadow map moves around on the fur. So you've got the multiple layers. So you've got the shadow map hitting that layer. That layer. It looks like the shadow map just hits all of the different layers and then blends together, which is what makes the shadow map look really smooth. Or that's just a illusion which makes the shadow map look smoother. I imagine the shadow map is just hitting the top layer and it just looks smoother. It looks like it's hitting more of the fur, because it actually looks like it's hitting that fur in a really natural way. Yeah, you can see it on that top layer there. Looks like it's just hitting that first layer of fur. and then slightly less on the upper layers. So maybe the shadow map strength goes down as the layers go up, which gives it that nice effect where it looks blurry and it looks like it's actually hitting the fur. It's pretty cool. You can kind of see it there going up the fur layers. That's clever. Again, that gives it that illusion of depth to the fur. It's also how the light falls on the different layers. Get that light here. So you can see the light is being applied across the hairs on each individual layer. So different levels of shading across the little spots there and across the layers as well. So it looks like the actual light's going across the fur, which is again pretty amazing. That must be part of the fur pattern texture that denotes how much light should be going where at what angle. So each individual little bit of shine there, and each different layer works together smoothly. So it looks like the light is moving across individual blades of hair or fur, again giving even more of that illusion of depth. You can do some animations. So pressing the numbered buttons is supposed to do the animations, but it doesn't. I'm guessing that was a feature that was removed. You can put on slow motion, just toggle the music on and off. I kind of like the music because it's kind of freaky. L, toggle the light mode. So you can basically just go full bright essentially. There we go, slow-mo. That's kind of freaky. So if we can zoom in. God, the detail is amazing. Just want to know how those fins are made now. I'm guessing they're just little textures rendered on there with transparency. Oh, Assassin's Creed Unity mode there. Oh, look at the eyes, man. Oh, that's freaky. So there's his face. Let's get the light round. That light on his eyeball. I'm wondering if that's even a shader effect, not just like a sprite that moves around relative to where the light is. Or it's some sort of Phong effect, maybe. The detail from that bump map, though, look at that. Well, that normal map looks great. These demos are a good 2-3 years ahead of their time for what would be in video games. So we've got the standard NV demo viewer with F1. Then you go to the Maya viewer F2. Okay, that doesn't do anything either. Well, it does something. F2. The Maya view. I'm not sure what that Maya view does. It seems to just move the camera to look down like that. Pretty much all of the keys, fins, fur layers, fur depth. We'll see if we can see these fins in the textures. But yeah, that has pretty much resolved the mystery of how this fur rendering works in video games. And it is so remarkably simple. Probably not in execution, but at least in concept it's simpler than you'd think. And like I said, when you zoom in on Crash in Crash Bandicoot, the remaster from 2017, you see that same effect. So I think it's just the same level of technology being used, like 16 years later. I wonder if there's a more advanced way they found to do fur nowadays that gets around this limitation at hard angles to the fur. And if they've found a way to also allow it to do real-time shadowing in the fur. Probably quite expensive, but that'd be something to look into. Again, I'd love to see a more modernized demo of this using much more modern fur effects and with like a ray traced pipeline or something. That'd be really cool to see, but you don't see too many demos like this anymore, which is a shame. Again, I'd love to run this on real GeForce 4 hardware with a Pentium 4 or something like that. See how it runs. It's pretty much locked to 60 FPS here. Just zoom out, let the werewolf do some animations. That's really cool. Really cool animation tech. Looks like there's some sprite-based lights here to make it look like they're brighter than they actually are because this isn't using HDR. That background is hilarious, but it gives it a kind of creepy vibe because it doesn't feel like a real place. So yeah, pretty much every half a minute or so, it runs through all the animations, the walking, the running, the howling, the breathing, the growling, the looking around. There's the shading. So you can see the blocks of the sprites there. So all the fur tech, the fins and the fur layers don't seem to be too worried about the normals on the model. So I'm guessing the way that's rendered, it's just not bothered about which way things are facing. Or it might be model space versus world space kind of things. I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah, that is the werewolf demo. But it's a really good insight into how that fur tech works. And to adjust all those things, the layers, the spaces between the layers, everything like that, just really gives you a good intuition for how this fur tech works, which is amazing. So here we are back at the actual file layout. Okay, yeah, GLUT32 is to do with OpenGL, so this does run in OpenGL. Oh yeah, it says GL right there, obviously, Fur Viewer GL. That makes sense. No DX mode, which is interesting. Let's have a look in the textures here. So you got the flare, that'll be the light flare from the street lamps. Yep, almost looks like a photograph. Pretty standard stuff. Full block, transparency applied. That's the fur.tga. So this is your fur pattern. Okay, so that's the texture that must inform the pixel shader and what colors and where to shade fur. That's layer 8. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all 8 layers, 0 indexed, of the fur patterns. Yeah, there you go. And it must be purple to green representing depth or the gradient of the color that then the pixel shader uses to then apply the color to each little strand here. And each of those layers build up, probably with the Vertex shader making that sort of bubble layer around the werewolf. Yeah, this is the matrix palette skinning using Vertex shaders and anisotropic lighting. So that's all like the normal mapping, stuff like that. Yeah, the volumetric fur rendering, the different layers, fins. So looking at matrix palette skinning, it's letting each vertex be influenced by multiple bone matrices. Blended by per vertex weights, the final position is computed in the shader. In the DirectX 8 era, vertex shaders would address registers and constant registers to hold the matrices, enabling real-time GPU skinning. That unpacks the bone indices, uses the addressed registers to fetch the 4 matrices from the register file, apply the weighted blending and transform the vertex, which is much faster than using the CPU. So that's what we're seeing with those registers in the shader code. That'll be these registers here, 4 bones, and that's what's being used to transform the vertices that then allows those different layers of textures to go on. And within the shader, that's probably what we're seeing when we turn the shader mode on in Werewolf and see those normal texture bits that have the colored normals, the RGB, and then the grayscale bits are the actual vertices and the bone matrices, of which the fins of the fur are attached to and the fur layers are added to as well, so that they stay consistent with the actual model as it moves, so that you don't get any wobble or warp or anything like that connected to the main skeleton of the model. I think, so you can keep the fur consistently there. If you tried doing it old school, I'm guessing you'd get a lot of wobble and inconsistency, kind of like Quake 2 models. So that makes a lot of sense. And this makes a lot more sense now looking at this code with the registers. So I'll try to find some links to this and put them in the description so you can read up a bit more about it yourself. But yeah, this is all leveraged with DirectX 8, GeForce 3, GeForce 4, enabling that hardware skinning, which enables those multiple layers of textures, which then enables the fur effect. Let's have a look at the textures again. So you've got the rocks, you've got specular maps, the normal maps, fur color. Okie dokie, so that's the color map for the fur, for the arm. Skin color, eyelids, eyes, face, gums, we standard stuff. Are there any other fur colors? Here we go, leg fur color. So when you completely get rid of the fur, you don't see any of this. So I think what this is, this relates to the file we were looking at earlier, which is this file, or these layers, the fur layer files. And I think what might be happening here is you have this as a layer. These pink to green colors represent depth, and then what the shaders do is a lookup to this file to then get what color should be being rendered within that layer, and then all the layers work with each other to eventually make that consistent fur color. Guessing the more pink it is, brighter fur color it's going to choose. The more green it is, the darker the fur color it's going to choose. Because the different layers are sampling this color, eventually they all come to that sort of pattern and that color, but with the 3D effect rather than just this flat effect here. And instead of being a texture, this is more of a lookup, I guess, of colors. So you can design how you want the fur to look, the colors, the pattern, design the layers, and then the layers are rendered over the top of each other, the pixel shader picking colors from here, and eventually you end up with that 3D effect of this fur. And then it looks like you've got a cube map here. Seems to be just loading up blank. Not sure what those are doing. Maybe that's some sort of cube map that helps the lighting model. The jeans on the werewolf, or the hot pants. There we go. Again, that just looks like a photo of literally some hot pants. That's quite funny. And then you've got the normal map of the hot pants. So that's all standard rendering stuff that we've seen before. Now the final thing I want to look for is the fins, wolf fin. Let's load that up. Yeah, there we go. Just like I thought, it's a transparent texture. So you've got those bone matrices, you've got the weights that hold them onto the model, you've got the layers where you can put the fur layers, where the pixel shader takes those fur layers, samples from that fur color texture and renders them for each layer. And then you've got the fins, which are the actual hairs sticking out from the werewolf that are attached to those blocks that we saw in the shader view. And these are rendered with transparency. I think just a very simple 2D texture just rendered on those blocks that are attached to those bones on the model, and it's as simple as that. And that probably has a pixel shader to look up colors on it as well. So I think that's about it. Now this demo is really cool, and these demos are always really cool because they allow you to look in quite a lot of detail what's happening with these demos and how these things work. And just in the course of making this video, I've learned a lot about how fur rendering works in video games, which is really cool. And like I said, it looks like some of that fur tech is still used today, or at least fairly recently, which is pretty amazing to see. That's how effective it is. I'm just wondering if they've found more effective ways to do fur in modern rendering. There's just one final thing I want to try. If I grab this program Shadow VXP here, ask ChatGPT 5 what it thinks this code is doing. A Vertex program doing 3 bone matrix palette skinning, then a final world view projection. So you've got your explanation of the constants are, the inputs. So the summary is it looks up 3 bone matrices from a constant palette using per vertex indices, blends them in their transform positions by the weights, does some stuff here to emit the final clip space position. So that's quite complicated. It's going to take me a while to figure out what that really means and get intuition for it. But I think it's essentially using that to just add the layers of skins to the model and keep them weighted to the model so they don't wobble around. That's a rabbit hole that we haven't got time to go down at the moment, but at some point we may do in another video, because people seem to like these videos, so I'm going to keep making them. So that is the werewolf fur demo from NVIDIA from 2001 for the GeForce 4 using OpenGL, and latest fur rendering technology that's still used quite a few years later and is really effective and much simpler in concept than I thought it was. Like I said, the execution is probably quite complex, but the actual concept is far more simple than I thought it would be, because you kind of get the impression that it's rendering each individual little hair here somehow. It looks really complicated, like how is it rendering all these little hairs? How's it doing that? Are they 3D? And then you realize it's just skinned layers of textures with pixel shader lookups to color them. Absolutely genius. And then the extra little fins there, the little transparent hairs, just for that extra cherry on top touch. Do subscribe and hit the little bell for notifications, because there will be another graphics demo coming up at some point. It may just not be next week. But yeah, stick around, leave a comment, let me know what you think, leave a like on the video. Let me know what your favorite NVIDIA demo is, or if there's any demos you want me to check out for the channel, and I'll have a look. Check out the description for more details. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.